Hi, welcome back. So why is it that anytime when we are to start an English conversation with someone, we're always doing that Chinese to English translation practice in our head? Why do we keep translating everything from Chinese to English? Why can't we stop ourselves from putting all our thoughts into Chinese first? Anytime when we need to open our mouth to put together an English sentence. Obviously, this is not ideal because if we keep doing the translation, our English will sound kind of robotic. It's definitely not natural. Our sentences are way too long. And because they're too long, we make a lot more grammatical mistakes. We're unsure of ourselves. We keep thinking back to the sentence we just said and trying to figure out if we made any mistakes there or if we made a fool out of ourselves. I'm sure a lot of us run into this, and sometimes I'm still doing that in my head without realizing I'm actually doing it. It's really not the best way to go about English speaking because you're never going to get as fluent as you would like to be. Your English will not sound very native or authentic or spontaneous. You know, it will sound like you're reciting something as opposed to spontaneously respond to somebody else's question or trying to put together a really interesting story to share with others. And I've talked about why this is not, an acceptable way for us to speak English, especially if we want to become eventually more like a native speaker, being able to respond to things intuitively, as if we're speaking our own language. And the main reason really is because of the differences in the English and Chinese syntax. For me, Chinese is a very flexible language. And by that, I meant we don't always start our sentence with the subject, right? We have so many different ways to start a sentence, and all of them are acceptable. They are easily understood by other people. Whereas for English, is more predictable, and because of that, it's less flexible. 80-90% of the time, you can almost always expect your sentence to start with a subject and then a verb and sometimes an object. Those are the most commonly used sentence structure. And that's why I always recommend my students, anytime when you're putting together a sentence in your head before speaking it out loud, it's important to think about what you want as the subject of your sentence. What is the main verb in your sentence, as opposed to trying to put that thought into Chinese and then translate it from there. For example, let's look at this Chinese sentence. You can pause the video for a couple of seconds. Think about this idea in your head and then think about how you would articulate this idea in English. If I were to say this in English, this is what I would come up with. Fitness and self-improvement are both important parts of my life. Because of them, I constantly feel strong and hopeful. As you can see, if we look at the Chinese and English side by side, they're actually quite different. And like I said, because of all the differences in the syntax and many other areas in these two languages. Therefore, I would like to go back to the point that I made earlier. If we insist on translating everything from Chinese to English, anytime when you want to say anything in English, it's not going to end very well. You're not going to sound very natural. And a lot of times that just gets in the way of us trying to have a meaningful conversation with somebody else in the English language. So what can we do instead? If translation is out of the picture, what else can we do? Again, I've given you this idea multiple times in my previous videos. My answer is always to adopt the English way of thinking. Now, you've probably seen this idea in a lot of places. It's brought up by a lot of people online. What I want to say here is that it's not as complicated or mysterious as what a lot of people online make it to be. For me, to adopt the English way of thinking simply means to learn those commonly used expressions or sentence structures or phrases, whatever you need to very spontaneously respond to a situation in the English language. So in the process, you kind of skip the part where you have to translate your thoughts into your native language. That part is not in the process anymore. So what's good about that is your fluency will greatly improve because you're no longer having this prolonged process of trying to pair an English word to a Chinese word and then dwell upon, the grammar within that sentence or whether or not your choice of English words was accurate. So what we do instead in this case is when we're in a situation, when we're responding to a certain type of questions, we already have this idea in our head that we know these are the sentences we're going to use, these are the expressions we're going to use to respond to the other person, or, to help us express whatever we have going on in our head. I'll give you a couple of examples here. So if I am asked about why I like doing certain things, immediately in my head, I would be thinking about sentence structures like doing something is great for, or it is beneficial for me to do something, or doing something allows me to do something else, or it prevents me from doing something. So for example, for working out, I can say it's really beneficial for my physical and mental health, or it allows me to stay energetic, allows me to stay positive all day long, or it prevents me from having a sedentary lifestyle. So when I'm asked about that particular topic, and when I'm asked why I like it, these sentence structures or expressions would automatically show up in my head. And these are the things that we can learn and accumulate over time. And you can right away see the benefit of practicing your speaking like this. There is no more translation. You're no longer trying to express yourself word by word, right? You already have this set structure that you can use. All you need to do is think of the actual idea and put the substance into these structures. Essentially, to improve your spoken English is to become more and more proficient with these commonly used structures or expressions, so that when you're in a particular circumstance, you already know what you're going to say. So all you need to spend time thinking about is the actual substance of your answer. And when we start to think about adopting the English way of thinking, we're actually forced to think about the meanings and the context of each new expression or new sentence structure that we learned. So instead of focusing only on the language itself, think about the meaning of that expression. Think about the particular circumstances that expression was being used in. Because you need to know those things for you to be able to use that expression yourself.